Brian, I left my phone at home, so it'll have to be my office phone. Great, thanks.
Good morning. This is Chair French convening the regular business meeting of the Kansas Corporation for this Tuesday, July 30th. I'm joined by my colleagues, Commissioner Keene and Commissioner Keither. On today's agenda, we have our consent agenda with 44 items on it, and we have 3 noticed items. We will begin with our consent agenda. Commissioners, you've had the opportunity to review the consent agenda and all 33 or 44 items, sorry. Let me ask at this time whether you have any questions, and I will begin with Commissioner Keither
No, I do not. Thank you.
and Commissioner Keene.
No questions, thank you. I am recusing on consent agenda item number 3. Noting that recusal, I would move the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, noting Commissioner Keene's recusal on item number 3. Is there any further discussion to that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The consent agenda is approved. We now will move to our noticed items. Our first noticed item is in docket number 24 SPEE 415 TAR, and this is a proposed order on the unanimous partial settlement. And I believe also on the items that are not settled.
Yes, good morning, commissioners. It is designed to be inclusive, so hopefully we met that goal. On November 30th, Southern Pioneer filed an application to revise its rate design to address class subsidization occurring under its present rate structure and to modernize its rates and tariffs to better serve its customers' needs and demands. On May 16th, Southern Pioneer, commission staff, CURB, National Beef Packing Company, and Air Products and Chemical Incorporated all filed a unanimous partial settlement, resolving all but 2 issues in the docket. The remaining issues were adopting a residential customer demand charge and an increase in the customer charge. The order first goes through the unanimous partial settlement, explaining that it's a unanimous settlement agreement under KR 82-1-230A, and therefore we apply a 3 rather than 5-factor test. And while the order goes into more detail for today's purposes, I'll just explain that the order says that having reviewed the record as a whole, the commission finds the unanimous partial settlement is supported by substantial competent evidence, that the rates resulting from the unanimous partial settlement are just and reasonable, and that the unanimous partial settlement is in the public interest. Therefore, this order would approve the unanimous partial settlement in its entirety. With that, we'll turn to the disputed issues. And again, Southern Pioneer proposes a $3 per kilowatt demand charge for residential and general service small customers, and also proposes to increase the residential customer charge for single-phase customers from $14.67 to $16.67. Staff agrees that a demand charge is appropriate and also supports the proposal to increase the customer charge because staff thinks that Southern Pioneer's evidence shows its current charges were well below the customer cost of service. CURB opposes both an increase in its single-phase customer charge and the demand charge, and interveners, Air Products, and National Beef are neutral and took no positions. Turning to the demand charge, this order notes that CURB's opposition to the proposed demand charge is centered on its belief that it unfairly targets distributed generation customers. However, the evidence suggests the 3-part rate structure is designed to address more than just DG customers. There are other customers that do not pay their fair share of distribution capacity based on their usage of that capacity. And as examples, space heater customers, people that charge their electric vehicles at home, and customers with second homes or hunting lodges. Southern Pioneer is a nonprofit corporation and therefore is tasked with recovering its costs and earning a margin as required by its members, but is not motivated by profits the way typical investor owned utilities are. Therefore, commission staff believed that Southern Pioneer was an ideal candidate to be the first utility in Kansas to implement a mandatory three-part rate structure for residential customers. This order agrees with staff that Southern Pioneer is ideally suited to be the first Kansas utility to implement a mandatory three-part rate structure. But while the commission is approving Southern Pioneer's request to implement a mandatory three-part rate, the order recognizes the unique structure of Southern Pioneer and states that nothing in the order should suggest a mandatory three-part rate is appropriate for other utilities. While CURB opposes the demand charge on the basis that it's too hard for customers to understand and is not reflective of cost causation due to the diversity that exists both within the system and each class, CURB never challenged the size of the demand charge or alleged that the demand charge is unreasonably burdensome. Thus, really the only evidence before the commission suggests a $3 demand charge is reasonable, and the commission approves the $3 demand charge for residential and GSS classes. Turning to the customer charge, the commission finds it compelling that both staff and Southern Pioneer agree that Southern Pioneer's current charges do not cover the customer cost of service. This order finds that the testimony of both Dr. Glass and Mr. Mackey to be more credible than that of CURB's witness, Mr. Watkins. The order finds overwhelming evidence that Southern Pioneer's current customer charge does not recover its fixed costs. And there's substantial evidence that even the proposed $16.67 customer charge is still not enough to recover those fixed costs. This order agrees with Dr. Glass's testimony that a $16.67 customer charge is reasonable, and thus the commission approves the $16.67 customer charge for Southern Pioneer. I know that's a lot to digest, and I'm available for questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Let's see at this time whether the commissioners have any questions for you, and I will begin with Commissioner Keither.
I do not. It is very, very clear, and I support where we're going with this.
And Commissioner Keen.
Yes, thank you for the overview, Brian. It was relatively succinct but inclusive. It was well done, per usual here. And I have no questions. I would move approval of the order.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the order as described by Mr. Fedotin. Is there any discussion of that motion? Well, I guess this is the time for me to add that I will be dissenting on one piece of the order, and that is simply the residential demand charge. I'm not going to detail my reasoning at this time. I have a brief statement that will be attached to the order, which will list out my reasons for dissenting on that issue. I do want to say my statement may come across a bit strong, but I also want to emphasize that I'm not imputing the integrity of the company in any manner and the process it went about to set its rates. I thought the witnesses that testified before us were incredibly transparent and candid about the process that the company went through to try to determine appropriate rates for its customers. And I commend them for that. I think I simply just have a disagreement on policy and what the evidence would actually support in this proceeding. But with that, I will reserve any further comments, and folks can read my statement, which is attached to the order. So with that, we do have a motion and a second to approve the order as described by Mr. Fedotin. And I guess I will, if there is no further discussion, I will go ahead and call the question. All in favor of the motion, please vote aye.
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 And I am an aye, except for, as described, the small sliver that I am dissenting on. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. Thank you, Brian.
Thank
With
you,
that, We will now move to our second noticed item. This is in docket number 24 GIME 102 GIE. And this is a proposed order establishing scope of investigation in that docket. And our presenter for this item is Mr. Aaron Bailey. Good morning, Aaron.
Hey, good morning, y'all. Thanks for hearing me here. So as you read the proposed order, essentially back in May of 2023, there was an order to, I guess, Nextra Energy wanted a sitting permit for the Wolf Creek Blackberry project. And so this was essentially proposed to essentially just get some, I guess, some criteria or protocol for companies that want to look at sitting criteria. And so the staff back in December of last year said that they suggested doing this, and we had a couple of interveners, Evergy, Kansas Farm Bureau, Grain Belt Express, Kansas Livestock Association, NextEra, and Midwest Energy. Also, they all chimed in on kind of what they thought would be appropriate for this, look at this issue. And so in March of 2024, staff filed a R&R, essentially kind of focusing on the guidelines of land use parameters. So essentially kind of keeping an eye on where these are going to be set down, and I guess promoting transparency and interaction with the landowners. So that's what they were kind of trying to focus on. We got a lot of feedback from a lot of the different companies. But if you look at page 4, and I'm sure you all read this, but paragraph 9 kind of set through what the staff is recommending the commission kind of focus on, and their criteria is a little it's set out, and it doesn't vary very much from what the other companies kind of set out, but they did kind of the other companies had some different ideas about what to look at, but we do think that staff's recommendation was pretty good, because it basically keeps it to the fact of the landowners versus the transparency and the communication between them, and some of the companies' suggestions were staff just didn't agree with. So when we looked at this, we kind of thought that the staff's scope actually makes a lot of sense. And again, what we're doing here is we're providing like guidelines for the companies when they're doing a sight line. So we want to keep it kind of contained a little bit, if that makes sense. So but we are recommending that so the staff actually they wanted to recommend working with the companies. Paul Owings, he recommended that we kind of work with the companies because they were looking at maybe around Thanksgiving as far as the when they could provide feedback. So when we talked to staff, they thought that actually having the parties work together to do the procedural schedule would make sense, and they think they can get it done by August 7th. So that's why we have that in there. We originally wanted to put in something a little more constrained, but I think that staff agrees with that, and I think that they can work with those companies to get that schedule done in that time.
All right, so we do have an order to set the scope of the investigation, and we've got a process for the parties to propose a timeline on that. Are there any questions for Mr. Bailey? I'll begin with Commissioner Keither.
Not at this time.
And Commissioner Keen.
Questions for me either. I'd move approval of the order.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion and a second to approve the order as described. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. We will now move to our third and final noticed off order. This is in docket number 24 SPEE 688 RTS, and this is a proposed order on application for rate adjustments. And again, our presenter is Mr. Aaron Bailey. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you. So this relates a little bit to the one that Brian was talking about earlier, but essentially what's going on here is that they're proposing a fourth annual rate adjustment under the consolidated formula-based rate making plan. So essentially, and not to get into too much of the details here, but they have a 34.5 kilovolt, I could be wrong on the kilovolt, system. And so essentially they're proposing an adjustment to their rate, I guess to handle that system. And so staff essentially kind of recommended a reduction of that rate adjustment by $28,545. Essentially, there was some of their proposal was related to coffee, holiday parties, gym memberships, and et cetera. And so Southern Pioneer basically filed a response saying that, well, those are important for staff morale and all of that, but we I guess looking at this, we kind of agree that with staff, and Curb did file testimony as well. And Curb essentially said that they agree with recommending the reduction for the $28,545, that it was warranted because those costs are not related pursuant to the statute, which is 66-101. So other than that, staff agreed that the increase is warranted, but without that that $28,545, because they're not related to delivery of the process to the customers. So we are recommending that we agree with staff with that reduction for the $28,545, and again, Curb is okay with that. The response from Southern Pioneer essentially just said that it relates to staff morale. That's not what the statute says, is our opinion. So we are agreeing that the increase is warranted, but decrease it by that $28,545 for those reasons.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Bailey on this item, beginning again with Commissioner Keither
No.
and Commissioner Keen?
No questions for me. I would move approval of the order.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the order as described in this docket. Is there any further discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say no. The order is approved. Thank
We'll
you,
get 'em
Aaron.
out. We'll get them out. Thank you.
All right, thank you. With that, we have come to the conclusion of all the items noticed on today's business meeting agenda. If there's nothing further to come before us this morning, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please vote aye.
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 Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you all. Take care.
Thanks.
Take care.